Thought it went live automatically. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome into another edition of Forever Power 5. We are going live today. I'm Nick DiMartino. That's Zain Bando. And you can follow us across social media at FP5 ETB. You can follow me on Twitter at Nick DiMart, Zain at Zain Bando 99, and Will at Will Charlton H13. And you can follow the Empty the Bench Network across social media at FP5 at ETB Network. And this show on TikTok, on Twitter and Instagram is at FP5 ETB. On TikTok, it's at Forever Power 5, no caps or spaces. You can watch all Empty the Bench shows on YouTube.com/ETB Network, and you can listen to the show wherever you get your podcasts. And this show is presented by Playback. Stay tuned for later in the show to find out more. All right. So, Sherrone Moore was fired for cause at Michigan. In what was, I don't know what it is with all of these Big Ten coaches, but they can't stop getting themselves into trouble. At least SEC coaches not named Hugh Freeze get fired the old-fashioned way for just being a bunch of losers.
That I agree with.
There was actually a line from, I think it's called MGO Blog, where it's like a Michigan sports fan blog where they said, we were worried about Sherrone Moore's clock management, but instead we should have worried about his cock management.
Yeah,
amazing
no kidding.
line.
Well, it isn't just any fan site. It's actually like one of the main Michigan outlets that like covers them on a day-to-day basis. But yeah, they could not be more right about that. I mean, also shout out to the 26 people in here that are already watching this. We've barely been on stream for 2 minutes and people are piling in.
28 people now. Oh, 29. Oh, this number keeps going up. We're on track to get like 3,000 people watching. Yeah, I don't know what platforms they're watching on, but yeah.
Well, actually, so I can tell you. So we're live right now on YouTube. We're live right now on X. We're live right now on Twitch, and we're live right now on Kick. So several different places.
Okay.
Yeah. And we're also live on my personal YouTube and a personal Twitter as well. So
okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you want to leave a comment, you can leave a comment, and Zain, you can read the comments because
Sure,
I don't know if I can read any of them.
Sure, no problem.
Because I can't.
Absolutely.
I'm like Cardale Jones. So the Sherrone Moore thing is interesting because I mean, some people were saying that they were looking for an excuse to fire him, and I think that couldn't be further from the truth.
No, that couldn't be further from the truth at all. I mean, look at what's already come out about him. Like, I don't think there was any excuse. I don't even think excuse is the right word. That's kind of an absurd take. I don't know who had that take, but whoever has that take is solely mistaken, in my opinion.
My favorite sports radio host of all time had that take.
Interesting. And who would be your favorite sports radio host?
Craig Carton.
Okay.
He's the best, in my view, sports radio host ever. I also think he has the worst takes on college football ever. Both those things are true.
Why do you think he said what he said?
Because I think he thinks it.
Really?
I do. I think it's not. I think a lot of people think that. It's not that crazy. I mean, it's not that uncommon. I just don't think that if you think that, you're thinking it through, because Michigan has been going in the right direction with Sherrone Moore. That's why it wouldn't make sense for them to fire him, to look for an excuse to fire him. They wanted
exactly.
Sherrone Moore. So the thing is, because they just went 9-3, they were a mid-tier 9-3 team, I would say, and they improved tremendously since last year. And it's true that a lot of their wins were very ugly against below-average teams, but they were able to pull off the win, which is a huge upgrade from last year, where what did they go? 7-5, I think.
They were 7-5.
Or 6-6, if I'm not mistaken. So that's a huge upgrade from how good they were last year, and they're only getting better. And they only were expected to get better next year. If anything, if they had the same performance next year, then it would make sense for Michigan to want to fire him. But in this case, what he did was so egregious, it would have been really difficult for them not to fire him. I would understand it if he was like Mel Tucker. And by the way, it seems like Mel Tucker was just a victim of extortion. I don't really think he did anything all that bad. It doesn't seem like to me.
No, it doesn't seem like it either because of what eventually came out afterward. Right. Yeah.
So Mel
And
Tucker
by the
got
way,
a
holy cow, shout out to almost 100 people in here now. This is insane.
yeah, exactly. It's almost like I should take my clothes off. Okay, so you're right. I mean, Mel Tucker. I think here's what happened with Mel Tucker. Mel Tucker got a raw deal because he took his clothes off.
Yes, he sure did.
Mel Tucker.
Right. It's not like Mel Tucker wasn't going to get fired anyway, though at some point, because that Michigan State team in those years was so subpar.
They were so bad. I mean, the thing with Mel Tucker though is that it seems like to me that his relationship with that woman was consensual. Like it didn't look like sexual harassment, and she was extorting him, and Michigan State used that as an excuse to not pay his buyout. That's right. What I think was fairly obvious from everything that was happening. In this case, it's like Sherrone Moore. I don't think Michigan would have ever wanted to fire Sherrone Moore. In fact, proof that this was not an excuse to fire him is that of all the coaches that we've been talking about being on the hot seat, Sherrone Moore's name wasn't mentioned once. Not once. So, and some of those
people the only people that were clamoring to fire him before he was actually fired were the real diehard Michigan fans. But there were no credible reporters out there saying that he was on the chopping block or anything. It was a major surprise.
Yeah. No, he wasn't on but the reason was because how could they not fire him with everything that came out? First of all, you can't stoop a staffer as a head coach. Everybody knows you can't do that. It's all made very clear. I mean, some of the best coaches in the league couldn't keep. I mean, look, some of the best. Kirby Smart could probably get fired. I mean, maybe there's a few coaches that are so powerful that maybe they'd sweep it under the rug. But the vast majority of college football coaches get fired under those circumstances. And it's not the worst thing in the world for the teams because then they save money on paying the buyout, and there's a really good chance they fire the coach anyway and have to pay the buyout. So how often would a coach end up getting away with that? I mean, there's 68 major college football programs, and maybe I could count on one hand the number of coaches that could maybe get away with what Sherrone Moore did. I mean, not only did he have a sexual relationship with the staffer, but he also got arrested. Now, it seems unclear what he got arrested for, but it seems like
it's still very unclear. I don't think it's fully known why.
But it seems like he broke into her house, and according to reports, he broke into her house and also threatened to kill himself, which I really hope he gets help for that. But it seems
that's not good. And did you hear now that it's coming out that his wife apparently found out about it like everybody else did?
That's insane. That's crazy. I mean, the guy lost his job. The guy lost his job, his family, and his right to vote all in 24 hours. I thought it was bad when I lost $1,000 in the casino when I went to Vegas. I mean, this is way worse than that. That's an expensive affair.
No, for sure.
That has to be a really, really expensive affair. I mean,
and the sketchy thing is about her is the unbelievable pay increase that she got from last year to this year, which made clearly no sense to me whatsoever.
What was the pay increase?
What was it?
What was the pay increase?
It's from $50,000 to $100,000 or something for one fiscal year.
So she went. So she so they doubled her salary.
Yes,
in 1 year. I mean, that alone is very suspicious. I don't know how often that happens. It reminds me of that Seinfeld episode when George Costanza is banging the secretary and he yells, "I'm giving you a raise," but he doesn't have the power to give her a raise.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So he's really got to get his life together, is how I would put it. So
he needs to get his life together for sure. It's not even It's not even a matter of he needs to. It's like an imperative thing, because if he continues to go down this path, A, he's never going to be the same person again, and B, if it comes out that like all of this is true and he actually did this, he could be going away for a long time.
I mean, I don't think he probably won't go to prison. I mean, I don't. Yeah, like I just don't. I think he probably won't go to prison. But now the other question is, how does this affect him in the future, and how does it affect Michigan? Now, I think it hurts. I think it hurts Sherrone Moore a lot more than it hurts Michigan. I think
Well, yeah, it hurts Sherrone Moore a lot more because Michigan will eventually find a suitable replacement. That's why.
Now I don't right. It's similar to with Harbaugh. Like Harbaugh leaving was a bump in the road for Michigan, but Sherrone Moore was at least like he was one of Harbaugh's guys, and they filled him in, and he did a fairly decent job for those 2 years. And I think it's going to be a similar thing now because a guy like Sherrone Moore is definitely replaceable. I mean, it's certainly possible they can make a really bad hire, and that's going to mess everything up. But I don't think that's going to happen. I actually think Michigan will end up being fine. Do you think they're going to lose a lot of recruits because of this? Because
I think it could happen.
I think it could happen, although I don't think it's going to hurt them as bad as when Harbaugh left or when Lane Kiffin left Ole Miss. I don't think it's going to be as bad because there's a lot of coaches a lot of players that want to play under certain coaches. But I don't really think there's that many players that are like, I just want to play for Sherrone Moore.
Well, to counter you, though, wouldn't some of those guys have to know whether they're staying at Michigan based on who the coach is, though? Because based on who it is, I think that's going to determine whether they go or they stay.
You're saying that they would want to stay, right? Yes, but I think don't you think there's a certain level of brand in there too? Like,
yes, 100%. Yeah.
Like, how many recruits were just like, I got to play under Sherrone Moore? I mean, he's not Harbaugh, Saban, Urban. Like, he's not.
I think, well, yeah, now that you say that, I think most of them just wanted to play for Michigan. That's why.
Exactly. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think they'd rather play for Sherrone Moore than the new guy. I forget his name. The interim head coach or something like that.
Biff Poggi? Yeah,
Biff Poggi, that's it. So I'm sure they'd rather play under him than under Biff Poggi, but at the same time, I think that everything will just end up being okay for Michigan because, look, Michigan still has the big brand, and I think it's going to hurt recruits a little bit, but I really think it might just be a bump in the road. If the new head coach, I don't know if they're officially hiring him, but I just know he's
just the interim coach for right now.
So they probably won't even hire him full time.
No, I don't think so. Or they could do something similar to what Penn State did, where they kept Terry Smith on staff. They could do that, but I don't know if they will.
I guess it really sucks for Michigan right now because it must really suck for them now because all the good coaches are now taken. Like, what other good coaches available?
Right. Well, there's the rumor about Kalen DeBoer, right? Do you think he'll leave Alabama or no?
A fake account though. That came from an account with 90 followers.
Oh, really? Okay.
There really is. There's really no truth to that he would go. It's almost like the absurd rumors of Kalen DeBoer to Penn State. Like every college football season, there's so many absurd rumors about coaches going places that everybody and their mother knows isn't going to go. So I don't think Michigan is going to be able to get one of the big splash hires, but they could also hire another guy who's in-house, just like they did with Sherrone Moore, and that could work too. I mean, the truth is either one of those things could work if the coach does a fairly good job, and I would say Sherrone Moore did a fairly good job in those first 2 years. Doesn't mean it would have lasted, but he did a fairly good job.
I mean, he was 17-8, and he had a huge win against Ohio State. So it's not like it's not possible for whoever his replacement is to come right in and fix everything. But the question is going to be, it has to be the right replacement because If it isn't, then it could set the program back a bit. They shouldn't be. To me, the worst thing they could do is try to go after a young hot coordinator. They need someone with head coaching experience, I think. What do you think?
I don't necessarily agree. I think that hiring a coordinator could work pretty well. It's not like in the NFL where sometimes you need a coach with like tons of experience. I don't think you necessarily need to. And a really good example of this is Dan Lanning at Oregon.
Right.
He was a coordinator at Georgia, and he's doing a really, really good job there. So I don't really think it's a given that they have to hire a guy with tons of experience. I mean, look, sometimes the guys with tons of experience are the guys who can't adjust. I mean, look how well did that work for LSU when they hired Brian Kelly, or Texas A&M when they hired Jimbo Fisher? Those are guys with tons of experience. I mean, Jimbo Fisher had a national championship under his belt. So it's not necessarily a bad move. I mean, sometimes the best hire is the guy that you haven't heard of. Like when Ohio State hired Ryan Day, they hired a guy in-house. Like it wasn't a bad move at all. So, maybe that could be the best move for Michigan, is to hire a coordinator or an assistant or somebody else who's already there. That might not be a bad move.
No, yeah, and now that you put it that way, it might not be a bad move. I guess another sort of PR centric question to this is, why, in your opinion, do you think this came out now? Because I think that's some of the major confusion that a lot of people have is, why not have this come out a month ago or even a couple weeks ago? Like, why do you think this is now starting to come to the forefront?
Well, didn't you just get arrested yesterday?
Well, no, what I'm saying is like, I meant not his arrest, I meant his firing.
Well, because the incident just happened.
True, but I'm just saying there's been stuff that's been coming out about it to where they kind of knew like that this was sort of coming weeks ago.
Wait. So you're saying that you have information that Michigan knew that he was having an affair with the staffer?
Yeah, I mean, it's starting to come out now from some pretty credible reports that might be the case. Yeah.
But don't you think it's possible that this is like the Bobby Petrino situation where everybody found out about the affair because of the incident? Like in Bobby Petrino's case, it was the motorcycle accident, and in this case, it was his arrest. And it's also certainly possible that they knew about it and swept it under the rug, but now they can't anymore. Which, by the way, proves that that's not why which proves my point, which is obviously they're not firing him because they're not using this as an excuse. It's actually that their backs are against the wall and they have no choice.
Mm-hmm.
So it is possible that they knew about it and didn't say anything. I have no evidence to back that up, but I'm open to that possibility. But
Mm-hmm.
the way I see it is that, like, I think the story just came out and they probably didn't know about it either. I think it was this major event, the arrest that actually happened, that actually led that. I think it was the event that happened that tipped them off. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't have known. But I will say it is very suspicious for her to get for the girl to get such a raise in pay, uh, to have her salary doubled. When that's totally unprecedented. I mean, how do alarm bells not go off when people see that?
I don't know. Well, that's one thing, and then the other thing is, it's suspicious when all of a sudden all over social medias go private without any warning.
Well, I
Like,
mean,
they went
well,
from being no, I'm just saying they went from being public facing, like within like the last 2 days, to essentially um like no contact or no visual or no like public visualization, if you will.
do you think that's just because of the scandal that came out that she made her Instagram private?
I think so, yeah. I
Yeah,
do.
that's not suspicious. That's just a natural reaction to what happened.
Well, no. It's suspicious in the sense that, like, I don't know if you were paying attention, but like tons of fan accounts like found out who she was, and it started to get around that it was her. So
Yeah,
that was the part to me that was very, very like weird, that like people like dug in and actually like figured it out.
but
Like, just
but you knew that was going to happen. I don't think it's that weird that would happen.
no, right. I'm just saying the avalanche of people instantly figuring out who it was to me the crazy part.
Yeah. I don't know. Like Sherrone Moore just like I said, I think it's gonna be a lot worse for Sherrone Moore than it will be for
And I'm
Michigan.
going to be honest, when this news first broke, I didn't think it was legit at first.
Oh, it seems like some fake story that like Ballsack Sports would report or something like that.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know what it is in your conference, man. The Big Ten, all these coaches just they can't stop getting out of trouble.
I know. Well, that's now both major coaches from the state of Michigan fired in the same season.
Yeah.
But one was for on-field performance and the other wasn't. So that's kind of the irony of that.
Yeah,
So,
well, Jonathan Smith didn't get into trouble. He just didn't do a good enough job. But yeah, it just seems like a lot of in the Big Ten, there's just so many scandals. You have this one. You have Urban Meyer stepping down due to a scandal. Mel Tucker. I mean, Jesus, man, you guys, and of course Penn State. I don't know what it is in that conference, but there's always some trouble.
I know.
All right,
and it's every couple of seasons too. It's very, very interesting.
Yep. All right, so I want to talk about the final playoff rankings. We're doing the show too late in the week. It feels like old news now. And the debates have kind of died down a little bit, and I've been getting a lot of pushback for my takes on this. And
okay, I don't. By the way, I don't know any of your takes. Oh, I'm very, very.
You don't know my takes. We've been doing the show together. I've been giving my takes on this show.
No. What I'm saying is, what are your takes now that it's official? I knew what they were going in. I'm just curious, like what you think the committee got right and wrong, because that part I don't know your updated perspective, if you will. So
okay, that's fair. Well, I think, but I will say it's fairly predictable from my takes from before, which is that I think the committee got it wrong. I think they got it right the first time, and they got it wrong the second time. And there's a lot to unpack here. My position was I was in favor of Notre Dame being ahead of Miami. However, if the committee had set the stage from the beginning, that had said, look, Miami has the head-to-head over Notre Dame. They're both 10-2. Miami's ahead of Notre Dame. I would accept that and say, you know what? That's a totally reasonable argument. The problem is that when you set the stage in week 10, and I have the rankings ahead of me right now, in front of me right now, in week 10, Miami and Notre Dame were both 6-2. Notre Dame was ranked 10th. Miami was ranked 18th. Now, I did say at the time that Miami was ranked way too low because I don't know why it is they acted at the time like the win against Notre Dame didn't mean anything, and not for nothing, but the public didn't care about it either. There was no outrage. Everybody was just like, yeah, Notre Dame's ahead of Miami because their resume is better. And everybody was kind of okay with it. And I was saying at the time that Miami was ranked too low. Right. And now, so that was back in week 10. Since then, both teams did what they were expected to do. They both took care of business against their remaining opponents. Some of them were actually common opponents, and they both won all those games by really big margins, Notre Dame and Miami.
Correct.
They both the only thing that changed from Miami is that maybe they won those games by bigger margins than we expected, but same with Notre Dame. Nothing actually changed. Both teams took care of business the same, basically, since week 10. And now that the rankings come out in week 15, they put, because here's how it works with the rankings. Here's how it works. Everybody, and you know this too, I'm sure.
Yeah.
People, the way the committee ranks teams is that they rank them in clusters. So they rank, say, and it's not random, obviously. No, otherwise, you would be ranking like Alabama, Louisville, Georgia Tech. Like, obviously, that's not happening. It's not random. It's based on resume.
Right. It's based on resume.
So they rank these four teams, these 3 or 4 teams, these 3 or 4 teams, whatever. So the way they probably did it was they probably ranked Indiana, Ohio State, Georgia, Texas Tech, and Oregon, something like that.
Right.
And then they ranked the next 4 teams, which would have been Ole Miss, A&M, or like say Ole Miss, A&M, Notre Dame, and then Alabama, Oklahoma, and whatever. Or they probably did something like Oregon, A&M, Ole Miss. That was a cluster, and then they ranked Notre Dame, Alabama, Oklahoma. That's a cluster, and then they just kind of went down the line. That's probably how they did it. And the reason Notre Dame was ranked ahead of Miami and the head-to-head didn't come into account is because they weren't ranking those teams together, which proves that the committee, because here's the justification that the committee gave. The committee's justification was, look, these 2 teams' resumes are like exactly the same. And look, the head-to-head's got to take precedent. And I agree, the head-to-head always has to matter. But how can you say now that their resumes are exactly the same when you weren't even comparing those teams to begin with? It doesn't even make sense. Their resume didn't change. So here's what's happened in the past 5 weeks. The Louisville and SMU games became less important, and the Notre Dame-Miami game became more important. So if the Louisville SMU game is going to become less important, by that logic, so should the Notre Dame-Miami game, because that was also further away. So it doesn't make any sense. You're muted.
I was going to say, too, and the Notre Dame-Miami game, to add insult to injury, those two teams played on an actual field. So you're not only comparing resumes and clusters, but you're also taking a look at what actually happened on the field too. But the part that I don't understand, and I'm sure this is the part that you don't understand, is why did the standard change from the beginning of the playoff rankings being unveiled to the final week, where essentially the committee flipped with the positions of where Miami and Notre Dame were supposed to be? My whole issue with this whole thing, and it's not about should Miami have gotten in, should Notre Dame have gotten in. The standard should have remained the same. That's the issue that I have. If you're going to go off one standard the entire time going into the last week where the rankings actually count, then the same principle should have applied to the last week, and that's what I don't fully understand. So,
right. Yeah, and also, no, I agree completely. And that's why I wasn't outraged at the ranking, because the reason I was okay with the ranking is because I feel like the Notre Dame being ahead of Miami was much more consistent with how the committee operates. Miami being ahead of Notre Dame, I feel like was more a product of them being bullied by the public than it was about, and maybe even some corrupt, even like the ACC being very heavily involved. That's what it seemed like to me, a lot more than it was the committee sticking to their principles. And even if you think those principles are bad, at least, even if you disagree with the committee having those principles, at least it's been consistent that way. And people were like really outraged about Notre Dame being ahead of Miami. But like, here's what I think I said this last week, but I actually think the Notre Dame being ahead of Miami, when Miami has the head-to-head, is actually very similar to the Texas-Oklahoma situation, if you think about it, because Texas has the head-to-head over Oklahoma, but Oklahoma was ahead of was ahead of Texas, and the reason is very simple. It's because Texas's losses were much worse than Oklahoma's losses. They lost 35-10 to Georgia, which is going to leave a mark, and they lost to Florida, who is a below-average SEC team.
Yeah, and they barely beat Mississippi State
and Kentucky, and both of those games. So basically, it's for the same reason. On paper, if you just take wins and losses, if you just say, like, on paper, you can argue that Texas has a better resume than Oklahoma does. Texas has better wins than Oklahoma does, slightly. I mean, Texas has a win against Oklahoma and a win against A&M. Oklahoma has a win against Alabama and a win against Michigan. Texas's wins are better than Oklahoma's wins. And on top of that, Texas also has the head-to-head. Now, people are going to say that Texas is 9-3 and Oklahoma is 10-2, but I actually don't think that's relevant to this at all. Look, I can't read the committee's minds, but I don't think the committee cares that Texas is 9-3. Proof of this is that Texas is ranked with all the 10-2 teams. They're ranked in that cluster with all the 10-2 teams. They're ranked ahead of
and it's back to the same argument that you and I both agreed on a couple weeks ago, is them losing to Ohio State shouldn't be held against them because it was in week 1 and it was a non-conference game. It was a game that they scheduled themselves. Right.
Well, so to everybody saying it's like, well, Texas is 9-3 and Oklahoma's 10-2. Like, I think that's about. I know that happens to be true, but I don't think it's relevant. It's correlation and not causation. Look, I don't know exactly the committee's justification, but look.
Now, my other question for you is, do you understand the frustration about a 10-2 Notre Dame missing it as opposed to a 9-3 Alabama team getting in? Because I think a lot more people are upset about that than just the Miami Notre Dame argument, because there's also the Alabama argument, which my argument to that is Alabama has 4 ranked wins. One of those is against Georgia, and technically the committee didn't count the loss to Georgia in the SEC championship game against Alabama, so Alabama got in, and it stayed at number 9.
Well, Alabama's not 9-3. Alabama's 10-3, and that's because that's because one of the games that that's a bad argument. That's a really bad argument because Alabama earned. It was an extra game that Alabama earned, so that's a bad argument. However, I do agree with Notre Dame fans' frustration with the committee for other reasons, which is they go from in week 10 they're ranked at 10th. That was before Alabama lost.
Right.
Week 11, they move up to 9 because I think because there was a loss. Yeah, I think there was a loss ahead of them. And then so week 12, they're ranked number 9, and Alabama's ranked 10 because Alabama just lost to Oklahoma.
Right.
Why is it that at week 14? Alabama jumps Notre Dame because after week 14, Alabama jumps Notre Dame after Notre Dame beat Stanford and Alabama beat Auburn, and Alabama struggled against Auburn. What is the justification for swapping those two teams when nothing changed? If anything, Alabama had a worse day than Notre Dame did. Why is it that they just swapped places? That's really suspicious. And look, regardless of where you stand on who should have gotten in between Notre Dame and Miami, regardless, the committee systematically moved it around and finagled their way to put Miami in over Notre Dame because of, well, I don't know the reason, but it's very obvious that that's what they did. In spite of everything in spite of the stage that they set, and that's the most important part of the rankings, is setting the stage, because there's no justification for moving Alabama ahead of Notre Dame in that scenario when they both beat bad teams, and Alabama struggled more against their bad team. So
if you were to guess, why do you think they did that?
I think it's because the committee usually takes the path of least resistance.
Okay.
That's usually what they do. The only time I've seen them not take the path of least resistance is, maybe not the only time, but one of the few, was 2 years ago when Florida State wasn't in, and they put Alabama in.
And Alabama got in.
Which me and you have talked about that it was the right decision. By the way, proof that Florida State didn't belong is the fact that the committee got pummeled
by essentially 100 in the bowl game.
Exactly. So not only that, but proof that they truly didn't belong is that the committee was willing to get crucified publicly by not putting them in. That's proof that Florida State had no business being there.
It probably ended up being a good decision because they were horrendous the following season. So Could you have imagined them being a preseason number 5 team or whatever, and they got into the playoff and then they lost, and then the whole 2024 season was just a complete dumpster fire from the very beginning, as opposed to the collapse that became what it was.
Yeah, yeah, and Jordan Travis was really just like he really led that team. He really was the whole team. And and then they had DJ Uyunglele, who wasn't a great quarterback, but he was at least somewhat okay. He was at least serviceable. He was a starter.
Right,
So
exactly.
the point is that the committee always takes the path of least resistance. And which I think is a little bit of an issue, because the committee should at least be able to stick by their guns and just stick to their decisions and not care what the public says. And like I said, I just didn't think that my Notre Dame being ahead of Miami was in any way inconsistent with the rest of their rankings and how they've always done it since the beginning. I'll give you a good example. 4
Okay.
years ago, Michigan and Michigan State, and now it wasn't this consequential. It didn't matter in the end, but
Okay.
Michigan and Michigan State were both 8-1.
Oh, was this the 2021 season?
Yeah, Michigan State
Where Michigan State beat Michigan in East Lansing? Yeah.
Yeah, they beat Michigan at home by 4 points in a close game.
Right.
And Michigan and Michigan State each had one good win. Michigan beat Penn State. Michigan State beat Michigan. But Michigan State's one loss was to Purdue. Michigan's loss was on the road to Michigan State. They were both 8-1. The committee had Michigan ahead of Michigan State because Michigan State had a much worse loss than Michigan did, and the game was on the road.
Because Purdue sucked that year. They were not good. Purdue had no business winning that game, and they won it anyway. I remember.
I mean, Purdue is not. They're not as bad. They weren't as bad then as they are now. They were okay, but
they were okay, but they weren't. They weren't as good as they were the following year when they went to the Big Ten championship game.
Right.
So,
they weren't.
Yeah.
This was back in the old days of divisions, but
right.
They weren't as good then. They really were not. They were an average team at best, and that's why the committee put Michigan ahead of Michigan State, even though Michigan State beat them and they had the same record. And like I said,
yep.
I really failed to see the difference between Notre Dame being ahead of Miami and Texas being ahead of Oklahoma. I really failed to see the difference, because before you say Texas is 9, they don't have the same record. The committee cares about more than just record. Records are not all equal just because they're the same record mathematically. They care about body of work. So, so for everybody saying that Texas is 9-3 and Oklahoma's 10-2, well, ask yourself this question. If Texas had played Purdue or Cincinnati, or let's just say a fairly easy team, reliably easy team in the non-conference, or let's just say they scheduled Rice like a lot of teams do. Let's say Texas plays Rice.
By the way, Texas plays Rice quite often.
Yeah, they do. So let's just say
right.
Yeah. So let's just say
it would have made sense.
Let's just say in this hypothetical scenario,
okay,
Texas plays Rice in the non-conference. Texas goes 10-2. Oklahoma also goes 10-2, but nothing else changes for either team. The only difference is, instead of going to Columbus week 1, Texas plays Rice. Both teams are 10-2, and Texas has the head-to-head. Do you think Oklahoma isn't ranked ahead of Texas in that scenario?
They probably would be by that logic, right?
Right, exactly, because the 10-2 Texas team that plays Rice that beats Rice week 1 doesn't have any better of a resume than the 9-3 Texas team that scheduled Ohio State week 1 in Columbus and lost by 7 points. So it's like, can you really argue that Texas team in this scenario that beats Rice and goes 10-2 has a better resume than the current Texas team? You can't possibly argue that with a straight face. So, and I don't think the committee cares about it either. So in that scenario, yes, it's for, even though their records are different, the point is that it's for the same reason, which is that Texas's losses were worse than Oklahoma's losses. Oklahoma doesn't have any bad losses. Texas has 2 bad losses and 2 really, really ugly wins. It's the same thing with because I think Miami and Texas are actually very comparable. They have good wins and bad losses. Miami has 1 really good win, 2 really bad losses. Texas has 2 really good wins, 2 bad losses, and also 2 really, really bad wins, which the committee does take into account. So I think those 2 resumes are very comparable. I think Oklahoma and Alabama have very comparable resumes. 2 losses. I mean, one of Alabama's losses is certainly not very good, but also each team has a really good win, has a few good wins, actually. One really good win and a few other good wins. And Notre Dame is sort of in a class of its own where they don't have any great wins. Their best win is USC, which I think is fairly solid, underrated win in my view. But also no bad losses. Like their only losses were by A&M and Miami by a combined 4 points in the first 2 weeks of the season. Like
and also if you remember, Notre Dame kind of got screwed at the end of the A&M game anyway. So they
definitely did.
Yeah, they did.
They definitely did. And the thing is that if you look at all the 10-2 teams, in the loss department, Notre Dame looks the best. In the win department, Notre Dame is certainly not the best in that sense.
No,
but the point is that, like, for instance, I would argue Miami's win against Notre Dame is a little better than Notre Dame's win against USC, but it's fairly comparable. But the loss side of things is not comparable, which is why the committee said that Miami's resume was better than Notre Dame's. And I don't really care that they had the same record because records are not all equal. Now, let me ask you this scenario. Let's say instead of playing Texas A&M, because everybody's saying, well, they had the same record and Miami had the head-to-head. Well, let me give you this scenario. What if instead of playing Texas A&M, which, by the way, Notre Dame scheduled, they voluntarily gave themselves a harder schedule than Miami, not even arguable.
For the second year in a row, because they went to a College Station the year before.
Right.
So yeah. It was home and home.
Now, look, Notre Dame for many, many years has taken advantage of playing easier schedules and sneaking into the playoffs when maybe they shouldn't have been there. Unquestionably true. But this year, they actually played a tougher schedule than every ACC team. Every ACC team played an easier schedule this year than Notre Dame. Certainly all the top-tier ACC teams, because none of them played each other.
Well, 3 teams that enhance your argument right off the top: A&M, Miami, and USC.
Right, A&M, Miami, and USC. Those were their 3 best opponents. Miami played Notre Dame and Florida State like nobody else. Like Miami played nobody outside of the Notre Dame game. So the idea that those 2 now the head-to-head has to matter. I fully agree the head-to-head matters, but it's not the only thing that matters. And to pretend that those 2 teams' resumes were exactly the same or even similar, I just think is preposterous. Those 2 teams' resumes are not similar. Notre Dame's resume is much better. Now, if you want to say, look, it's close enough to the point where I think head-to-head needs to take precedent, I'd say, okay, fine. That's a reasonable argument. But I'm not going to pretend that the 2 teams' resumes are so similar that the head-to-head has to be the only thing that we look at. It's like Oklahoma, Alabama. The resumes are similar enough to the point where I'm like, yeah, we got to put Alabama. We have to put Oklahoma ahead of Alabama. But in Alabama, Georgia, for instance, before the championship week, obviously, Alabama had the head-to-head, but it was fairly understood that because Georgia's resume was so much better than Alabama's, that that Georgia was ranked ahead of Alabama and nobody had an issue with it. To me, I thought it was the same thing with Miami, Notre Dame. I thought it was a really, really similar scenario. And it's true that Alabama had 2 losses, but the point is that I don't really think it's about that. Like, people make it about the number of losses. I don't really think it matters that much. Like, even if Alabama had beaten Florida State, I don't think it would have. I think Alabama maybe would have been better off, but I think Georgia would have been ranked ahead of them anyway. I really do. Like, after Alabama lost to Oklahoma and they dropped the way they did, even if Alabama had beaten Florida State, I really do think the committee still would have dropped them below Georgia anyway, and they would have had the same record. So I really just don't think just because two teams have the same record that it really matters that much.
Well, what was your hypothetical scenario that you were going to ask me about?
Oh, what if Notre Dame had played Rice instead of Texas A&M, and they go 11-1? And it's not even so much for you, but it's for all the people saying, well, they had the same record. I mean, look, if Notre Dame had played Rice, or maybe not Rice, that might not be the best example, but maybe if they had played a reliably easy Power 4 team, which would be like, say, Cincinnati, which Notre Dame has done in the past. They played Cincinnati. Let's say Notre Dame played Cincinnati. Okay. And they win that game. They go 11-1. Does that Notre Dame team get in over Miami? Is there any controversy because they're 11-1 and Miami is 10-2, even though Miami is the head-to-head? Because if Notre Dame had played Cincinnati,
I actually think in that scenario, Nick D, that both teams get in.
How would both teams get in?
Well, you'd have to. Well, I'm saying that in a sense that then you would have had another scenario from teams that I'm not thinking about not play out the way that it did.
No, well, let's just say everything else in the season plays out.
Okay. I think that in that scenario, Notre Dame gets in over Miami.
Okay, then. So why is it? Why is it in that scenario it's okay for Notre Dame to get in over Miami when the body of work of a Notre Dame team that beats Cincinnati instead of loses to A&M, is that body of work any better, honestly? Like, the answer is no. And in that scenario, both teams would be playing fairly comparable schedules. You can even argue Notre Dame plays an even tougher schedule in that scenario. Even in that scenario, is the body of work of that Notre Dame team better than the body of work of the 10-2 Notre Dame team that lost by 1 point to A&M rather than a team that beat Cincinnati? Because it's safe to say that a team that loses by 1 point to Texas A&M would beat Cincinnati. So it's like, in that scenario, why would it then be okay? Because I understand these are hypotheticals and they didn't happen. But you have to be able to answer hypotheticals to justify your position. And that's just generally how I see things in general. Like, if you can't answer a hypothetical, you have to. Like, you can't really justify your own position in reality if you can't answer the hypothetical.
Right.
I do want to talk about. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was just saying. I was just saying. I mean, from the Notre Dame position and things, and something we haven't touched on, which I'd like to briefly touch on before we move on, because there's another angle to this. How do you feel about Notre Dame deciding to decline their Pop-Tarts Bowl bid?
The reason I'm okay with it is because, and this transitions to the next topic.
Sure.
The reason I'm okay with it is because these bowls are so. The problem is that the best players are opting out of these bowl games. To me, it's the equivalent of UNC declining to play in the NIT tournament. I think it was 2 years ago. And that's what these bowl games are. They're glorified NIT tournaments. And the problem is that these teams that are going to these bowl games are just too overqualified to be playing in a football version of the NIT. I mean, we've seen it even before the NIL era, where the team's best players are all sitting out. It's not even a good representation of the team that played during the season. And that's a problem with the current system. Why is it that and look, there's a lot of teams that will not play any meaningful postseason this year that are just too good. Look, I don't think BYU or Utah or USC are one of the 12 best teams, but I just think they're too good to be bound to a useless bowl game. And my view is get rid of all useless bowl games. Any bowl game that is not in some way connected to the playoff in some way, I just think should be abolished. I think a lot of those bowl games should just be moved to the point where maybe they can be used as play-ins for the tournament, for the playoff and things like that.
So you're of the position that if they were to get rid of bowl games, they should only make the ones that are prevalent to the situation playing games. And then are you saying that all the other teams that finished the season it just ends in week 14 for the
Yes.
for the rest of them.
Yeah, I think. I mean, look, I'd be in favor of having the same number of bowl games potentially as we used to, because if you include the playoff, which includes many games, and also maybe a play-in or something like that, I think that's how
Well,
they
there's
should do it.
technically 42 standalone bowl games, not including the playoff games, I think.
Correct. Yeah, I think that sounds about right. I don't know exactly what the number would be or should be, but look, with the 12-team playoff, that is a lot of games that I mean, you get. I haven't really done the math on this, but it's certainly it is a lot. And then maybe there could be some type of play-in, which I would support.
Like I
Uh,
would say, like looking at the bowl schedule, Nick D, I don't know if you have like 25% of the games at least mean absolutely nothing.
that's the thing. Like, don't get me wrong. I enjoy bowl season as much as anybody. I
I
always
do.
enjoy bowl
I
season.
I do too.
But here's the problem. The players don't care about it. The best players on all of these teams are opting out. And that's only going to get worse in this current NIL era. So like remember last year, Cam Ward in the Pop-Tart Bowl
Decided
broke.
to opt out at halftime.
He opted out during the game because he played just so he could break the FBS touchdown pass record, which by the
Yeah,
way is a little skewed.
and then he lost.
Yeah, and then they lost by 1 point in overtime. You couldn't script a more absurd scenario. So it's like, so Cam Ward does that. And it's like, by the way, he was actually very well liked too by all the NFL teams. That's how low the standard is now. I mean, a guy can do 10 years ago, I couldn't imagine a player doing that. So if
Right.
that's going to happen, if we're going to be having backup quarterbacks be playing in these bowl games because players are opting out, it's not worth having them. I don't want everybody playing at half strength in these games. It's not even, like it's so ridiculous at some point. At some point, I think there should be a playoff expansion or at least a play-in opportunity or something where at least
There
every
should
bowl game is
definitely
somewhat
be some.
meaningful.
I agree with one part of your statement, and that is there should be some sort of play-in weekend. Yeah,
Like
I
some,
agree. I agree with that
but
because
like
because you've seen it. You've seen it with the NBA playing games, and it seems to have worked pretty well from what I understand. There's no reason why college football can't do the same thing.
that's what I'm saying. And I just think a lot more stuff should just be settled on the field rather than decided by rather than decided in a room. And I'm not saying I don't like rankings. I love the ranking system. I really do. I do think something should be decided in the room, but I'd rather err on the side of settling it on the field, either on campus or at a neutral site, whatever the case may be. Like for
Right.
instance, BYU. I think Texas should be in the playoff, and we should get
I
automatic
think so
bids.
too. I
Like
think so
Texas
too.
should be a playoff team. The only problem is that the committee couldn't put them in due to automatic bids, which is fucking ridiculous, obviously.
Could you make the argument that BYU should be in, or because they lost to Texas Tech twice, did they deserve to be out?
Well, here's the thing. If you're picking the 12 teams, I would say BYU is not a top 12 team. I don't think they should have been in over Texas. BYU also has no good wins, really. Utah, maybe. Style points not great. None of their wins are really good, in my view. I don't really think any of their wins are that good. They don't have any bad losses, but Texas has two amazing wins, two really good wins against A&M and against Oklahoma. Two really good wins, and also a bad loss.
And they could have had a third if they had beat Ohio State.
Right. Look, I don't care about that, but the thing is, though, BYU's wins are not good. None of their wins are that good. I mean, they do have a win against Utah, which is okay, but and also we want to talk about Texas's style points, like they almost lost to Mississippi State and Kentucky. I mean, there are a few games where BYU was fortunate to beat Cincinnati. So I just think like BYU was fortunate to beat Colorado. So there's some of that too with BYU, but losing to Texas Tech to me was very similar to BYU to Texas losing to Georgia. They lost by a really big margin. They got blown out by a good team. So the way I see it is Texas has two good wins that BYU doesn't have and only one bad loss. So the way I see it is Texas should be in over BYU. But I would prefer there be a scenario where BYU gets a chance and can at least settle it on the field. That's better to me than just picking Texas over BYU. And the G5 thing, we both agree on this, is freaking ridiculous. Why is it that G5 teams can just not play against any Power 4 competition and get into the playoff? I mean, James Madison does not only not have a ranked win, they don't even have a Power 4 win. They played Louisville and they lost, and Louisville's not even ranked. Like, why should they get in? They have no reason to be in there.
No, I agree with you 100%.
It's totally laughable.
And by the way, you want to talk about the argument for Tulane, how they should be out? They got pummeled by Ole Miss. They got destroyed.
Exactly. So all I'm saying is I think every team should be held to the same standard. But what I think we should do instead is just have a separate playoff for the G5 and for the Power 4. I think that's the best case scenario, because I think it's better for G5 teams to have a separate playoff, because think about it. None of the G5 teams that are going to get in, especially when they're getting in to fill a quota, none of them are making a run. It's not going to mean anything in the end. But I think if you were to say pick the top 12 G5 teams, for instance, well,
I wouldn't be able to do it.
Right. I'm not saying it should be our job. I'm just saying, like, if you were to pick the top 12 G5 teams, for instance, maybe it doesn't need to be 12, whatever the number is.
Okay.
All those, that's many more G5 teams that have an opportunity to actually win something. That's better for way more G5 teams, and that's much better for them than it is to put them in a playoff that most of them really have no business being in.
So basically what you're saying is with this proposed hypothetical G5 playoff format, it would essentially be the same format that the FCS has, right? Essentially?
Well, what format does the FCS have, but it's the same concept, I guess.
Well, no, I'm just saying FCS is their own playoff tournament that's currently going on at the moment. What I'm saying is, if you were to do the same thing with G5, you would just do a G5 CFP tournament with only group of 5 teams.
Exactly, and that's how it can be. Look, if we can have separate FCS and FBS playoffs, we can do the same thing with the G5 and the Power 4. We just have separate playoffs for those teams, because the truth is, a G5 team is not ever going to win at all. They're not even. It's not like in basketball where George Mason makes a run. You're not going to get that in football. So, and I would watch it too. Like, people, like, I don't hate the G5. I want what's good for these G5 teams, and that's much better for them than going into a playoff that they have no business in. And I also just don't like the idea of teams getting special treatment and not being held to the same standard as other teams just because they're G5 teams and we need to fill some type of quota. I think that's ridiculous.
I think so too, especially when you talk about them not having a ranked win and all of these other teams, having these quality wins that are measurable. When let's be real, Nick D, is the committee obsessively watching James Madison and Tulane every Saturday? No way, absolutely not. There's no way. There's there's no time, and B, there's simply no substance.
Right. And look, I'm not in favor of the new rule that says Notre Dame's in the top 12.
I'm not in favor of it either.
I'm not in favor of it. But my only criticism is that every other team doesn't get that same treatment. Like, I think every team in the top 12 should be guaranteed a playoff spot, and that's it. That's really all it should be. Like, my criticism is not that Notre Dame is getting it. It's that the other teams aren't getting it. But for everybody outraged at it, it's like, why is it the same people that are outraged at that are often also the ones cheering on G5 teams, not even having to be, like, they don't even need to be, they barely need to be ranked at all to get into the playoffs. So, like, why are you in favor of that? So, like, that to me is just so obviously hypocritical.
Yeah, I think it's just because, simply put, Nick D, I think it's because people want to find whatever fits their narrative of discussion.
Yeah.
That's what I think. And if someone even remotely disagrees, even a little bit, those same people squash them for it when in fact they don't even really have a full argument. So that's kind of the way I look at that.
Yeah. All right. Finally, quickly, Army, Navy. Navy is giving 6. The over-under is 38 and a half. And I really like Army here to cover the number. And I like the under. These games are always very low scoring. We all know this. These games are very low scoring. And when these games are low, not to mention it's a rivalry game, Navy's a better team, obviously. Usually Navy's a better team. But I think Army will show up for this game. I also just think the game will be a little too low scoring for Navy to actually cover a number this big. Like I could see Navy winning this game like 20-17.
Yeah, I like the under in the game. I took Navy on Bando's breakdowns. I'm not sure if I like the number from when I took it, so I'm just going to go more conservative and say the under is a distinct possibility here. And don't be surprised, Nick D, if it's the same wacky ending that it was a couple years ago, where there was that blocked punt or missed field goal that led to overtime and then the eventual win. So I think it's going to be one of those games where whoever makes the last mistake or the last turnover is more than likely going to cost themselves. And with that being said, and with it potentially being a really cold atmosphere, I think the under is very, very possible.
Yeah.
So
all right. That's our show this week. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll be back next week to break down the college football playoffs. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. See you then.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate all of the live viewers tonight, and we hope to do more of this in the future. And shout out to the 248 people that pulled up. We really
wow.
Yeah, we
all
really,
we gotta do is go live on TikTok. We can break insane numbers.
that's for sure.
Right. See you guys then.
Have a good one.